Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I'm pleased to join my colleagues, Democratic Whip Mr. Hoyer, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, the senior Democrat on the Rules Committee, Congressman John Conyers, our champion on the Judiciary Committee, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick of Arizona. I'm pleased to join them in welcoming all of you and our special guest, Laura Dunn, a law student from Baltimore, Maryland. University of Maryland, and Juana Mahel Dixon of the National Congress of American Indians. Okay, 500 days have passed since the Violence Against Women Act authorization has expired. Since then, the Senate, in a bipartisan way, on 2 occasions, have passed the reauthorization, one just a matter of days ago. The House Democrats have been eager to work in a bipartisan fashion, as the Senate did, to support that bipartisan bill. What was it, Steny?
78-22.
Steny likes to say those numbers. Remember those numbers. 500 days, 78-22, to pass the bill in the manner that the Senate has done. Instead, the Republicans in the House, unfortunately, and I hope that this does not remain the case, but unfortunately at the moment, want to put forth a bill that is a non-starter for our nation's women. It's just not fair to say we're going to prevent violence against women not so fast from the LGBT community, the immigrant community, the Native American community. The bill leaves many victims without prevention, and that prevention is very important. Without prevention, protection, or defense against violence, omits protections for the LGBT community, offers inadequate protection for Native Americans, and creates added hurdles for immigrant women. It deletes provisions that help combat and prevent sexual crimes on campus. It just took that whole thing out of the Senate bill and undermines law enforcement and removes human trafficking provisions. Clearly a bill not worthy of the challenge that we face. Put simply, the bill strays from the primary purpose of the Violence Against Women Act to ensure the security of women in the face of abuse at home, in the workplace, in their communities, indeed in our country. So enough is enough. The time, 500 days have passed, 78-22 in the Senate. Once again, why don't we just make life simple and pass what the Senate did in a bipartisan way? Majority of the Republicans in the Senate voting for it, all of the women, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate voting for it. What are we waiting for? With that, I'm pleased to yield to our distinguished Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer, who's been a champion on this issue for decades.
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. Violence against women. We take an oath to protect the Constitution, but in effect, we take an oath to protect all of our people. All of our people, not some of our people. America has a history of not protecting all of our people all of the time. We are trying continuously to overcome the exclusion of some. The Violence Against Women Act passed by the Senate was inclusive. It wanted to protect all of our people. It wanted to encourage all people to come forward and bring to the attention of authorities that they have been abused, so the abuser can be stopped and not abuse others, whether on a reservation, whether they be members of an LGBT community, whether they be immigrants and perhaps afraid to come forward. And in the fear to come forward, they will allow the abuser to continue to abuse. That's what this issue is about. That's why I would urge my Republican colleagues and Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Cantor to bring the Senate bill to the floor for a vote. I believe every Democrat will vote for it. And there are 17 Republicans and 2 other Republicans who didn't get to sign the letter, 19 Republicans who have said to their leadership, bring the Senate bill to the floor. Now, 201, actually we have 200, 219 make 218, or 219. What I meant to say, you'll need 218. It makes 219, and we are over the number needed to pass the Senate bill. which passed 78 to 22. Now, the relevance of 78 to 22 is that's 78% of the United States Senate. Every Democrat voted for it, and a majority of Republicans voted for it. This is one of the most bipartisan bills that I've seen in the last 2 years and 2 months. The House has an opportunity to embrace a bipartisan bill which seeks to and does in fact protect all people. That's what America's about, not segmenting our people, not excluding some people, not saying to some, well, we really don't care about protecting you. If we're going to protect all people, we need to make sure that all people can come forward to help us stop abuse of women, of children, of men, of anybody who is abused. Let's hope the House leadership sees the wisdom of the Senate's overwhelming bipartisan vote and brings it to the floor. And I want to thank everybody who's here. I want to thank those who've shown great courage. I want to thank Louise Slaughter for her very early leadership on this issue, way out front, she and Pat Schroeder. I want to thank John Conyers, who's been such a hero of civil rights. And I want to thank our present sponsors and all of you who have the courage to come forward and say, I want to help. Ellie Smeel, I want to thank you for your great leadership in so many issues. Unfortunately, I have another meeting, but I wanted to be here so that it was well known that our party is united on this, but frankly, the Republican Party ought to be united as well. The protection of all people is not a partisan issue. Hopefully, we can move the Senate bill. Thank you very much.
My name is Gwen Moore, and I'm the current sponsor of the Violence Against Women Act, and I want to thank my predecessors who introduced this bill in 1994 in its original form. As a member of Congress and this current sponsor, I am disappointed, I'm frustrated, I am tired of the foot dragging, the delays, the gutting of the Violence Against Women Act that was passed in the Senate. And as a woman, and as a woman of color, I am filled with rage about what has happened. This is so unproductive, what the House GOP is doing. I started out trying to be bipartisan, but I just cannot fathom how we have gotten here today. How can we justify turning battered women away because of their sexual orientation and be so cavalier about it and say that it doesn't matter? How can we throw our Native American women under the bus who are subjected to violence 2-3 times the rate because the perpetrators know that there's a gap in jurisdiction and that they can rape them and beat them and batter them with impunity as long as it's done on tribal lands? How can we turn away from our goal to stop human trafficking? How could they take that out of the bill? The protections for human trafficking. How could they take out protections against stalking? How could they have done that? And my God, how could they be so blind as not to recognize that, particularly as it relates to sexual assault, that our college students are prime targets? How could they strip away protections for prevention of rape against our college students? I beg my GOP colleagues to stand up for what is right and righteous and reconsider this ill-conceived legislation and work together with us to pass the bipartisan Senate bill. I'm going to introduce you to someone who I'm very proud of. She is a law student at the University of Maryland. But before she became a student at the University of Maryland, she was an undergraduate student at the University of Wisconsin. And like many women, she was involved in the activities of the university and decided to take up rowing. And it was a team sport. She's going to work with the team. And 2 of her crew members decided to sexually assault her. Laura Dunn had to first overcome the fear, the pain, the shame, the silence inside of herself. But finally, she came forward and told so that there could be some justification and some justice for her, but spoke out and demanded that the university be accountable. And for the rest of her undergraduate college career, she sought justice for herself and advocated for improved responses to campus sexual violence, much as we decided we needed to do in the current VAWA bill. She is not a victim. She is a survivor. And let me tell you something. She's going to speak here today, but these women that you see here behind me represent over 1,300 organizations in this country who have spoken out against the GOP's ill-conceived bill and support the Senate bill. And so, with much ado, I want to introduce you to a sexual assault survivor, Ms. Laura Dunn.
Thank you, Congresswoman Moore. I'm very humbled by that introduction. And I also want to quickly thank Leader Pelosi and all the other members that are standing behind me to talk about this very important issue. I'm humbled because I am a victim, but I am speaking for many more. Justice delayed is justice denied. The Senate realized this and undertook bipartisan efforts to pass legislation that is about justice, not politics. Violence Against Women Act has continuously protected victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking. The Senate version of VAWA extends those protections to tribal women, immigrants, members of the LGBT community, and students on campus. I speak here today as a victim of campus sexual assault. I was raped by 2 men on my team back in April in 2004. And just as Congresswoman Moore said, I did not speak at first. But when I did, it was for no reason, because I never received justice. I found a system that was ineffective and an administration that was unwilling to help. The Campus Save Act, currently in the Senate version of VAWA, improves the situation. It requires campuses to have certain standards for disciplinary proceedings to ensure justice is possible for victims. It also supports campuses in preventing sexual violence. Ending sexual assault is not about politics. Stopping domestic violence is not about politics. Addressing stalking is not about politics. Ending violence against women is about justice. Justice for victims like me and victims everywhere. I urge the House GOP to stop the delay, to set aside the politics, and pass VAWA now, because justice delayed is justice denied. Thank you.
I'm Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick from Arizona. When the Senate passed this bill, all of the Arizona senators voted with the majority of Republicans to pass it. Those senators know, as I know, that these important protections are very important to our constituents. They are especially important in my district, which is 25% Native American. Unfortunately, women in tribal regions are 2.5 times more likely to be assaulted in their lifetimes than other women. 2.5 times. Protecting women and holding perpetrators accountable is not a partisan issue. I'm disappointed that the House Republicans are pushing a substitute version that weakens protections for certain groups of women, especially Native American women. I strongly support the Senate-passed version because it strengthens those protections. Again, this should not be a partisan issue. House Republicans should do as the Senate Republicans did and join Democrats to pass a strong, bipartisan bill. Let's work together and get this done. I now have the honor of introducing a great Native American leader, Juana Mahel Dixon. She is the first Vice President of the National Congress of American Indians. She is co-chair of the Violence Against Women, and she is a legislative council member of the Palma Band of Mission Indians.
Yes.
Ms. Dixon, thank you so much.
Thank you. Chonomish, Chupa, I thought he's still love. In my own language, I ask Creator to be here. In my own language, I ask us to come together as a people. And in my own language, I ask Creator that I have your permission to speak. Yes? Okay. You know, I am honored and humbled to be here, and the leadership that is standing here beside me and who have stepped forward to do what is necessary in Congress is unspeakable in my memory of how things have been so hard for them. It should never have been. They speak truths. They tell you the violence against our Native women. Even this very day, a Native woman is being violated. We so loved this world when you all came. We made you all family. You know, we married so many of you. 53% of our Native women have married non-Indians. But unfortunately, we discovered more than 70% of them have been harmed or violated by domestic violence and dating violence, predominantly domestic violence. It seems simple enough. We are in the Constitution. We are a part of the Founding Fathers' language of this country. In the very words that we, the people, are about, that's what we're in. It is simple to understand. Our relationship is with you embedded in the Constitution, so how could it be unconstitutional? The simplicity of our message and our journey together is that, yes, we are sovereigns, but it makes sense. We enter this relationship knowing that. So all we do is ask that you acknowledge the sovereignty of our people that provides protection for the violence in our countries. It is not simply to be a Native woman and accept this. And I hear the words of these women and the leaders throughout the country, the national leaders who have come together, who speak on our behalf. Yes, we support and understand the issues for the LBGT and the immigration and our other sisters out there. We have stood together since '94. We have chosen as women of this country to stand together as a people to make this a possibility. It scares me to know that on the edge of time that we are moving in, that there's that possibility that a serial perpetrator in Indian country can continue to exist. It is hard not to have protections and to have the misunderstanding of what should be done to a perpetrator in Indian country. The separation that we have with that misunderstanding staggers me. I love the work that these women do, and our tribal men that are here, as well as our congressmen that are here, that do the work that they do in the language that they speak. They have to carry our message plus the message of their constituents. It is beautiful to know that surely we have to deal with all the members of Congress for tribes. That's our sovereign relationship. But to hear them carry not only the message of their constituents, but ours, it humbles me. Indian country knows this. I could never tell you how much it means to me to protect our Native women from the voices that come across their lips, the breath they give to those words. They no longer belong to them. They belong to the people. And they're saying to you, give us the right to protect our women in Indian country against domestic violence and dating violence. Thank you. Chonamish, all my relations.
Thank you. I don't think I've been to a more eloquent press conference, and the things that I've heard today, again, reinforce what we had heard in '94 when we first wrote the bill, without any single thought of excluding anybody who was hurting in the United States of America. The word shameful doesn't cover what's happening here today. The Rules Committee was going to go in at 3 o'clock. They've changed the time to 4:30. There's some problem out there. I don't know what it is, but I hope with all my heart, for Laura's sake and for all the rest of the women in this country, that the people who have said we want the Senate bill will prevail this afternoon, and we can get this done with, of all things, with everything facing the United States of America, we are worrying over this bill that cut domestic violence 67% during its lifetime. Imagine the calluses. It's worse than calluses. I don't think I've got a word that will really cover what I think they're doing today. That makes no sense. Obviously, what the Senate did was wonderful in including campuses, because you're absolutely right. Universities and colleges didn't particularly want to know about you, did they? Now what is going to happen to the Lauras out there without this bill? The idea that 300,000 rape kits, which will also be looked at, they've been unattended to, was part of this bill, was a great addition to it and needs to be passed. But for heaven's sake, it's going to be like what they did with 33 times trying to kill health care. And then this comes up, are we going to be voting on violence against women once a month around here? Do we finally get it? You know, humanity really cries out. Frankly, it's not the language of our Native Americans, our language, my accent, or anything. It is the language of humanity. And the people that we represent have sent us down here to do our part, to try to make life better for the people we represent. We can't do that as long as any of them are in peril. So thank you for your attention. Appreciate the opportunity just to be here with such wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Slaughter. I remember well your fight with Congresswoman Schroeder as you joined together to pass the Violence Against Women Act so long ago. One of the champions for us at that time is now the ranking member, once the chair, hopefully soon to be chair again, of the Judiciary Committee. And he has been there throughout the whole process with his knowledge, with his leadership, with his dedication, and his commitment. Congressman Conyers, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Leader. The Senate has already passed a strong bipartisan bill. And so our job is relatively simple because it contains the critical protections for all victims of domestic violence. The House and those victims deserve an up or down vote on the Senate legislation. That's what we want. But we are not at all confident that we're going to get it. Instead, the majority in this House is playing politics and pushing through a partisan version of the Violence Against Women Act that is really quite embarrassing for those who were here in 1994 when it was part of the Omnibus Crime Bill. They know that a partisan version of violence against women is dead on arrival. It's time for the House Republicans to join their colleagues in the Senate and stand up for all victims. And so this magnificent press conference is testimony to the fact that we're going to let everybody in this country know that what's going on and the disservice that is taking place when we allow this to happen. 78 to 22, all women in the other body. And we omit the protections against LGBT community, weaken essential protections against the Native American community, makes campuses less safe, and completely omits bipartisan provisions to combat sex trafficking. The majority has drafted this legislation without the input of a single Democrat and in complete disregard of the victims. I find it hard to understand why the majority is yet again steamrolling through legislation that picks and chooses which victims are deserving of protection. But I can tell you this, they won't get away with it this time.
Actually, the fact is that some of the categories that they leave out are those people who need these protections the most. They need these protections the most. What they're doing in terms of the Native American community is really to undermine the principle of sovereignty, which is in the Constitution, by layering on, making the provisions in this bill not only worse than what is in the Senate bill, but less than what is in current law at this time. So I want to acknowledge, you see all these wonderful representatives of support for the Violence Against Women Act as passed by the Senate. Behind us here, I want to acknowledge Dara Baldwin of the National Council of Independent Living. You're going to have to wave there because I can't turn around every time. Bill Bernstein of the Mosaic Family Services. Daniel Carter, National Camp Safety Index. Julie Fulker, Break the Cycle, Desiree Hoffman, Young Women's Christian Association, USA, Dr. Alice Howard, National Council of Black Women, Alondra Letzam, National Organization of Women, Ellie Schmiel, Feminist Majority Foundation, Keely Sorensen, Safe Horizon, and Ivy Suryanopoulos, Asian American Legal Defense Education Fund, and Ivy Suryanopoulos. You would say it correctly for me? Suryanopoulos. Thank you all. Let us salute them for the work that they and all of you are doing on this account. As our colleagues were speaking, I was remembering from the mid-'90s when we passed this bill that we then had to take it to a place with Steny, with Rosa DeLauro, Nita Lowey, now the senior Democrat on appropriations, and get the funding for it. We always worked in a bipartisan way. What didn't mean everybody agreed on every subject all the time, but we worked in a bipartisan way to get the funding. Other kinds of things raised their heads, like, for example, if a woman wanted to leave an abusive situation and she was seeking legal services. The law was that you had to test the income of the abuser.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that gave her no opportunity to get the legal services because the very person who was abusing her had the income, she did not. So in any event, all along the way, it's been a fight for women, and it's hard to understand, as our chairman, Mr. Conyers, said, it's hard to understand why are they doing this? Are they so extreme that they paint themselves so far away from a bipartisan majority in the United States Senate? When a majority of the Republicans supported this bill, all of the women, Democrats and Republicans, supported this bill. Where are the women in the Republican caucus to support their sisters in the community? With that, I know my colleagues would be pleased to take any questions you may have on